All right, everybody, Charleston, South Carolina. Tommy Condon's a great place to come and eat if you're ever in Charleston. Tommy Condon used to go to Ireland to get his mirrors. And apparently in Ireland, if you do not cover the mirrors after someone dies and you pass that body by the mirror, it will be its soul or its spirit will be sucked into the mirrors. And there are several stories of people being in the mirrors. And when you look into the mirrors, they will attack you, pull your hair, try and reach out to you and pull you in with them as well. But that's not the story I wanted to tell you tonight. I'm walking up Church Street in Charleston. Location, St. Philip's Church. Oldest congregation in Charleston, founded 1680. The building that I am approaching burned down in the fire 1824 and was reconstructed in 1825. The original location of the church was actually on Broad Street. Now, the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery is that a graveyard's connected to the church, whereas a cemetery isn't. The story I want to tell you is about a ghost who crosses this very street. He goes back and forth, back and forth. He's lost, perhaps, restless for sure. The man that I'm speaking of is in this cemetery. He was twice the vice president of the United States. He resigned under the second president that he served under. That president's name, Andrew Jackson. See, John C. Calhoun and Andrew Jackson were not friends. Both Southern men, but definitely not friends. You see, they first argued over the Seminole Wars in Florida. John C. Calhoun was against the war, along with President Monroe. And Jackson, General Jackson, went against their wishes and invaded Florida. John C. Calhoun resigned over the issue of nullification. Nullification is whether or not a state that deemed a federal law unconstitutional could in fact not enforce that law. An early version of states' rights versus federal rights. Can't say it was wrong. How many of you have heard of or engage in smoking marijuana? It's against federal law, but state law says it's okay. So, or how about a federal ban on abortion? Would you not want to have your state, if you found it unconstitutional, to enact abortion laws in your state to protect abortion? So, as you can see, the man might have been right in principle, depending on how you look at it. Now, John C. Calhoun, when he resigns the presidency or the vice presidency over the issue of nullification, he resigns and he becomes the senator to South Carolina. Now, while he's serving as senator, he dies in Washington, D.C. His wife, Fluoride, yes, that's her name, Fluoride, has him brought down to Charleston, a city which he hated. He loathed Charleston. He thought the people were snobbish and ignorant. So if you don't like John C. Calhoun, this is the perfect place for him to be buried, is in Charleston. They say that John C. Calhoun, when his wife has him brought down here and buried in the cemetery, it's just a few years before the Civil War starts. Now, once the Civil War starts, which was a states' rights versus federal rights, the Confederacy was afraid that they were going to blame John C. Calhoun and come here to Charleston, if they occupied Charleston, to dig up his body and desecrate his corpse. So they dug him up and they moved him to the graveyard, or just right there. Now, they say that he was put under the stairs here at St. Philip's. All I really know is when they moved him with a promise that after the Civil War, they would dig him up and put him back in the cemetery, they forgot where he was because it was an unmarked grave. So, for 20 years, he's in this unmarked grave. Now, legend has it, a little lady who's a congregation member here at St. Philip's goes to the pastor and says, "Pastor, I'm 90 years old. I'm fixing to expire soon. Would you please move John C. Calhoun out my grave so I can be laid to rest next to my husband?" They honored her wishes, dug him up, and moved him back here to the graveyard. Now, this is not his grave. This is a grave of someone I'll cover in the future. But he's about in this area, in a big grave with a monument, Calhoun, in capital letters. They say on the night of a full moon, you can see John C. Calhoun going back and forth across this very street. Now, they say that they see only his head and his hands in the middle of the street. That leads me to believe that perhaps in all of his mileage of moving back and forth, that perhaps there are parts of him in the cemetery and parts of him in the graveyard. Now, it's not a new moon tonight or a full moon, so I don't expect to see John C. But I just wanted to show you this beautiful building. And I will come back and cover this further in depth of a historical point of view in the daylight. Until then, if you see John C. Calhoun, give the man a little bit of help. Help him know where he belongs. He belongs in the cemetery and not the graveyard. You have to be a native-born Charlestonian, 7 generations deep, to be buried in that graveyard. And John C. Calhoun, they tried to dig him up in 2020 during the BLM riots. St. Philip's Church put their foot down and said, "The man's been here resting in peace. Let him rest in peace here. We're not moving him again." And so, instead, they went to Marion Square and tore down his statue. Now, John C. Calhoun, like I said, if you don't like him, then this is the place where he belongs.